Hey guys, welcome back to BackPocketGameReviews, and this is a video that has been a long time in the making, and something I keep getting asked about are different systems that I remember. So today we're going to take a little trip down memory lane with BPGR. We're going to talk about all of the consoles that I've owned, and what consoles I loved, and some of the games that I really liked on them. Because a lot of you guys be like, oh, did you ever play on this? Hey, do you remember this? Yeah. So I'm 29. I remember a lot. My first game console was an NES, which my favorite games on were the original Mario Brothers, Super Mario 3, Punch-Out. Loved Punch-Out. Punch-Out was so good. And Paperboy. Really liked Paperboy. It was always a fun game for me. Those were the four biggest ones I remember on the NES. I was pretty young when I had the NES. And then I got a Game Boy, which me and my cousin used to play Tetris on all the time. She would whoop me in Tetris, and I really liked Paperboy on it as well. And obviously, the Kirby's Dream Land series was probably one of my favorite Game Boy series. There were a lot of other good games like Link's Awakening, plenty of different things that I remember on it. But I loved my Game Boy. I had like the little attachment with the magnifying glass and the light. Game Boy was such a good memory. I also had Sega Genesis. Yep. Loved my Genesis. Genesis was pretty sweet. So with the Genesis, obviously the Sonic games. Who didn't play the Sonic games? Come on. The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie game, that one was sweet. That's still one of my favorite games to this day on that console. Genesis was an awesome console. I would tell you that I preferred it over the Super Nintendo, but I'm sure I'm going to receive some backlash for that. Certain games that were ported between the two did way better on the Genesis because Sega did what Nintendo don't, okay? That's why when all you guys think that there's some console war still going on, I don't think you understand the bashing that went on between Nintendo and Sega. Sega took direct pot shots at Nintendo. And it was edgy. It was very 90s. And I'm very 90s. I love stuff like 90s commercials. Especially the Genesis commercials. They were fantastic. There were a lot of games I really did like on the Genesis. Those were just a couple of my faves right there. Especially Sonic and Knuckles. That was probably my favorite Sonic game. I also had a Sega CD. Yep, not a lot of people owned one of those. That was awesome. My favorite game on the Sega CD was Revengers of Vengeance. I stayed up. It was New Year's Eve. It was like 2 a.m. I was about to beat the game. I even yelled at my dad and his girlfriend at the time, and a bunch of other people that were over, saying they need to quiet down because I was about to beat this game, and this game was intense. Revengers of Vengeance is sort of like a fighting game, but with semi-RPG-like elements mixed into it. It's an awesome game. If you have an emulator for Sega CD, or if you have the means to get an emulator for Sega CD, you should go try Revengers of Vengeance. Fantastic game. I also really liked the Road Rash series. Either the Genesis or the Sega CD one. They were both really good. I was a huge Road Rash fan back in the day. I was really excited when I thought they were going to bring that series back. And we'll just say they haven't brought it back. Sega CD was a blast, though. Batman Returns was also really good, especially the levels where you got to drive the Batmobile, because you felt like super cool because you're driving the Batmobile. And the 1989 Batman movies and Batman Returns, those were two of my favorite movies as a kid, and still are two of my favorite movies to this day. So Sega CD played a huge part of my childhood. My stepsisters had a Super Nintendo, so I did get to play on that a lot. Super Mario World was obviously probably my favorite game on that system. I really liked Yoshi's Island, which I think is like Super Mario World 3 Yoshi's. It has a full title, but that was really good as well. Mario Kart was pretty good on it. I mean, there were a lot of really good games even on the Super Nintendo, but I still would prefer my Genesis. If we were coming down between the two, I liked Genesis better as a younger person, and a lot of it was because it just came off as so edgy. I mean, their whole marketing campaign was amazing, and both consoles are phenomenal. Like, looking back, they're both incredible consoles. That was probably one of the most pinnacle fights I've ever seen between two consoles there. I also had a Game Gear. I don't remember the Game Gear really well. The part I remember about the Game Gear was it destroying batteries. I think it took like 6 AAA. It was like 6 or 8, and that thing just ate them. Like 2 hours of play, and you needed new batteries. It was inhuman. Game Boy had much better battery life. I had a Game Boy Color. I remember my Game Boy Color pretty vividly. The Pokemon games were huge for me. I loved the Pokemon games. Pokemon Red and Soul Silver. I mean, I was at the age where, the first movies came out. I saw them in theaters. I was in like 6th grade. Burger King released the little toys, the Pokeball toys, which was still Burger King's greatest kids meal toy to this day. I liked Burger King a lot as a kid. Like, Burger King blew them all out of the water to me as a kid. And a lot of that was because of all the Pokemon stuff. And they had the gold-plated cards. You could pay like $20, and they came with like this Pokeball display that would hold up the card. It was sweet. So, Pokemon was a huge part for me as a kid. I loved the Pokemon trading card game on the Game Boy. I wasn't huge about it, playing it in person, but I loved the game on the Game Boy. Well, on the Game Boy Color. Then, and this is probably like this is where I really remember like a lot of my gaming. And I got the N64 for Christmas the year it came out. Unfortunately, I don't have a reaction video of me opening it, or you could have watched me shriek like a little girl. That kid's reaction wasn't that out of the ordinary if you got an N64, okay? That thing was super hard to find. It was an amazing console. But, my favorite games were probably Mario 64. I loved the South Park game where you threw the snowballs at the turkeys. The multiplayer for that was a lot of fun as well. Perfect Dark. I loved GoldenEye, but I preferred Perfect Dark over GoldenEye. Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask, I actually never played until I was older. I didn't ever play it until I got it on my 3DS, which is kind of crazy to think about, that I missed literally one of the biggest games on there. But I loved the Tony Hawk games back then. I mean, there was so much good stuff coming out, and I had. So I'm gonna tell you this story first before we go into the PlayStation 1 part. So I got the N64 for Christmas and plugged it all up. I was super excited. I got Mortal Kombat was one of the games I got. I believe it was like Mortal Kombat Gold. And my family is very religious, especially my aunt. And she saw me playing Mortal Kombat and lost it. Literally lost it. My mother had to return the game. I was never allowed to touch Mortal Kombat in my mother's house again because a man was able to hit a woman in the game. There's your equal rights for you. Yeah, that was... But, so, I also had a PS1. My dad got me the PS1 because my dad always would try to offset what my mom got me. Like, my mom's had the Genesis. My dad had the Genesis and the Sega CD. And then my parents are divorced, by the way. At my dad's, I had a PS1. So, I mean, games that I really vividly remember from PS1 were Parasite Eve. Loved Parasite Eve. Again, the Tony Hawk games. Final Fantasy VII was huge for me back then. Oh, I mean, there's Metal Gear. Oh my god, the original Metal Gear. That game was... So I'll say this. PS1 had some great games. Nintendo had better games, but PlayStation had more good, great games. But Nintendo's exclusives alone could have sank Sony. Nintendo really, really messed up when it came to later, but we'll get to that. We're working our way along this timeline here. So, loved my PS1. Then I had a Dreamcast. Yeah, so my first foray back into, Sega, because I skipped 32X, I skipped the Saturn, and then I got a Dreamcast. Jet Grind Radio, Sonic Adventures 2, Crazy Taxi, and House of the Dead 2 with the gun. That was my favorite arcade game. Being able to play that at home was just amazing. I loved the Genesis. I thought the UMD was such a cool idea when it came out. Unfortunately, that system being ahead of its time, and with it being able to be pirated for the game so easily, kind of sank its battleship. But then I got a PS2. PS2 I bought with my own money. It was my confirmation money. I was like, it was the day it came out. It was like 8th grade. Next year I got a job. So this is like really where I'm starting to be able to buy my own games and stuff like that. And I got really into the Grand Theft Auto series. Grand Theft Auto 3 was probably one of the greatest games ever to me. But I also really liked games like The Bouncer, which I know The Bouncer gets a lot of hate. It was a Square Enix fighting RPG again. I really like that whole fighting RPG kind of thing. And then I also really liked Mr. Mosquito. I mean, there was just some crazy games. The PS2 had such a huge lineup. And then they remade one of my favorite N64 games. They did a pod racing game again. And I really liked the Pod Racer series, whether it be N64. Unfortunately, the PS2 was kind of after Road Rash had died. So obviously I had Road Rash on the PS1. I had it on the Genesis, had it on the Sega CD. And it died. The PS1 also got me into Harvest Moon. So then I picked up Harvest Moon with the PS2. Harvest Moon was another series I got really into for a while. I still like it. I love the one on the 3DS before Natsumi and them split. Trust me, I hear the newer ones aren't that good. I haven't touched one yet just because I've heard how terrible they are. But Harvest Moon, Roller Coaster Tycoon, those kind of games, I can lose a lot of time into. So then I had a GameCube. I bought a GameCube. Loved my GameCube, especially the Twin Snakes remake of the Metal Gear Solid. But even on the PS2, I loved Sons of Liberty, Snake Eater. Oh my god, Snake Eater was so good. I have it on my 3DS. Not as good on the 3DS. So there's parts I like better to it on the 3DS, but it controlled better on a PS2. So I was a huge Metal Gear fan. My GameCube also had probably my favorite Nintendo game of all time, which is Luigi's Mansion. I love Luigi's Mansion. That was that was the reason I picked up a 3DS when I bought one. I love Luigi's Mansion. If the Switch launches with a full Luigi's Mansion remake, like here's a brand new Luigi's Mansion, it's not a remake. I want a sequel, like a proper sequel, not a mobile port. I want a full sequel. The mobile game's really good, but the one that came out on the GameCube was still better. I then also got an Xbox. I did not get super into Xbox during the original Xbox. So I liked Halo 1 and 2. I loved Fable. Fable was probably a huge... really got into Fable. I mean, I blew off friends to play Fable. They're like, nah, I got plans tonight, guys. Sit at home playing Fable. And mind you, this is before the 360 came out, but I'm living on my own at this point, too. So I was like 18, just moved out. My friends would randomly stop over and catch me lying to them to play Fable. The Jedi Outcast game was on there. Oh man, that was so good. I have that on PC now because of how much I liked it on my Xbox and wanting to be able to revisit that game. They were fantastic games. But the game that I loved the most, my favorite original Xbox game, even over Halo, and it was made on the Halo engine, was Stubbs the Zombie. I would love a full HD remake of Stubbs the Zombie. Please, please give that to me, Microsoft. Give me Stubbs the Zombie. So 360 was where I switched over to Xbox fully. And that was because all my friends did for Gears of War. which I got super into Gears of War, and then Halo 3 came out. And I mean, there were so many good games that came out on the 360. I did eventually buy a PS3 as well, and a Wii. Everyone had a Wii. I got my Wii day of release. I waited outside in the freezing cold in the middle of November to get my Wii. And originally I was trying to convince all my friends too to go PS3 over 360 because I was a huge Sony fanboy at the time. I loved Sony. 360 was where my mind changed. And a lot of that was Halo, Gears of War, a lot of the different exclusives. Mass Effect, when it came out, was an exclusive. I mean, there was a lot that they brought to the table. Microsoft was stupid for selling BioWare. They should have held on to BioWare, never gave them over to EA. Let's see, what else was there? Oh, God. The Wii had some good games, too. Like Twilight Princess is still probably my favorite Zelda game of all time, even over Ocarina of Time, which I love Ocarina of Time as well. I like Wind Waker. Wind Waker wasn't bad. I prefer the Wii U remake to the original. But, so obviously, I had the PS3, which I mainly bought for Metal Gear Solid 4. That was the biggest reason I bought it. Then I started to really like the Uncharted, and I loved Killzone 3. Killzone 3 was also extremely good on there. Heavy Rain was awesome. But again, I would tell you 360 over PS3, and that would be without really any kind of hard decision to make. When it came to exclusives, 360 had more of them. They even got a lot more experimental than what they are now. They had stuff like Blue Dragon, Lost Odyssey, but 360 had a lot of exclusives. So then, here we are now, and this time, I had an original DS too. Before I forget about that, I had a DS. I worked in the call center at the time, so between calls, when I first started out, I would sit there and I'd play my DS in between calls. A lot of us would play Metroid Prime, or the Metroid game, on there against each other with local multiplayer. And I played a lot of Halo 2 with my friends too back in the day, where we'd just sit there with 4 controllers and destroy each other on small maps. But it's really weird to look back at all of the games and all of the game systems that I've owned. There's just... Gaming brought me a lot of my favorite memories, even with my friends. So I love split-screen gaming. And obviously now you all know I have a Wii U, I have a PS4, I have an Xbox One, I have a 3DS XL. I will be getting a Switch when it comes out. Project Scorpio depends on the price. Ugh, I'm really worried what they're going to announce that price at. 5 to 6, I'm probably still going to be interested. Anything more than that, maybe not. So, I have a very rich gaming history here, guys. So, if you do have any questions about games that I might remember, hey, did you like this game, or did you forget about this? Let me know in the comments down below. You may be surprised at what I do or don't like. And don't forget to drop a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, guys, because I enjoyed making this, and it was a long time coming. But... Guys, thanks for watching. I'll have more content coming up for you soon. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And if you like the content, turn on notifications. You'll know when they come out then. But we'll see you soon, guys, and thanks for watching.